Hi everyone, Fluffy Stuffy McGruffy here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this Tierra Whack album, Worldwide Whack. Yep, new album from Philly rapper, songwriter, singer, Tierra Whack. Her long-awaited sophomore album that I and many have been waiting for with bated breath. His breath, it's bated! It's baiting too much! Somebody help him! Come on, help him! Leave a comment! That should help. Yeah, we've been doing that since her debut came out in 2018, since she smashed it in 2019 on the XXL Freshman Cyphers and Freestyles, since she expanded her sound in 2021 with an EP series where she dabbled in not just some rap, but some R&B and pop too. All I can say is that going into this album, I had big hopes. Hopes that Tierra would somehow be able to carry over the quirk and creativity from her last record and somehow expand on it. Because if you remember, a lot of the tracks on that record, intentionally so, were very brief, which made the whole experience very jumpy, a little jarring. It certainly did add to the character of the album, but by that same token, a lot of the time on this record, I was hitting melodies and I was hitting songs that I so desperately wished were longer. And I was worried we were going to be in for much the same experience on this new LP here once some of the singles started to drop. Tracks like Chanel Pit as well as Shower Song, which in many ways are quintessential Tierra Whack. You have an animated vocal delivery with very sticky leads and flows, a razor-sharp sense of humor exemplified by bars and refrains that depict imagery of the smell of Chanel in a mosh pit, just kind of goofing around, singing, having a good old time singing in the shower, a context in which Tierra describes having an uncharacteristically high level of bravery. The vibe of the song overall reads like some kind of weirdo Sesame Street musical segment, or like something from Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. And look, this is pretty much what I go to Tierra Whack for. And sure, while I think there are valid points of similarity that could be made between her and some of her contemporaries, like a Lil Yachty or a Tyler, the Creator, no one else in Tierra's stylistic lane right now would give us songs like these with the kind of lighthearted flair that she can. But while I do appreciate these tracks for their very specific character and personality, they also, functionally speaking, are kind of one-dimensional and very repetitive too, as neither vocally and instrumentally develop all that much, or hit notable transitions around the choruses that make them pop. The beats as well only reach a certain level of intensity, never really feeling like they're putting the pedal fully to the floor, and it leaves these songs feeling like reference tracks that more could be added to later in terms of structure or layers, which is another thing. Even some of the most fun and rowdy tracks on this record read as a little skeletal, as within the first few moments or the first leg of any given song, you've pretty much heard sonically everything a track is going to present to you, which for some might read like a confusing point to make, but I want to stress, I don't dislike the songs on this record at their core. I think there's a lot of catchy elements in these tracks, and Tierra clearly went into pretty much every song here with a theme, with a topical focus in mind. The majority of tracks on this record narratively also culminate into a larger picture too. But also it feels like, at least for me, there's something missing from this LP. There's not a whole lot of sonic or instrumental development. Many of the beats and vocal performances feel maybe a bit too shy, or they just don't really blossom at any point or grow or escalate, and it just makes the overall experience of these tracks and the album feel a little bit flat, even though when you're actually reading into the lyrics, the record is legitimately an emotional roller coaster. I mean, take the last single to release from this LP, for example, 27 Club, which was a shockingly dark moment that I don't think anybody was expecting in the lead up to this album, not just because it's so damn good, but the track is also about Tierra Whack feeling isolated and doomed to join the infamous 27 Club that the song is titled after. And like any great musician, she was able to translate those feelings into a piece of art that has a devastating impact. And believe it or not, this very introspective, sad, yearning vibe and feeling is actually what defines the bulk of the album. You have mood swings and family tensions being given a nod on the tone-setting intro, where Tierra also makes mention of having done a deal with the devil, I presume in order to have this career that she's in the midst of. As on this record, she comes across as being caught between this desire to create while simultaneously not really enjoying the stressors or pressures that come with being a figure of attention in the entertainment industry. There's also the similarly short track Numb, which features an ambient synth bed on top of which Tierra is delivering this near deadpan flow, and I can see why, given how she dives into self-harm on this track pretty boldly, as well as feelings of disassociation. The song Movies on the surface instrumentally sounds like a bit of an upbeat moment, like it's kind of a mood change on the record. I mean, after all, going to the movies is generally a pretty fun thing, but this beat and lyrical concept are pretty much just used as a vehicle to express a deep desire for a highly sought-after relationship, a love connection. And yet again, it's another moment on the record where I am left wanting more instrumentally, sonically, even if I am liking how the narrative here is adding to the overall story of the album. And that sense is made kind of worse by songs on this record that do have at least a bit of oomph to them. More punch, more groove, more rhythm, but whatever payoff they're kind of lightly building toward never really happens. I'm talking about maybe, for example, the very Yeezus-esque X, which has some kind of primal drum loops, some grimy bass, and I'm similarly underwhelmed by the track Misbehave too. But look, there are some tracks on the record that I think work better with a simpler approach. There's the very bittersweet Imaginary Friends, which is a track all about friendships falling apart, with a lot of lyrical details being delivered by Whack over this very woozy, idyllic guitar loop. There's Accessible, which is also very much about connections, but in this instance, romantic ones, with Whack doing a combo of rapping and singing about somebody who is kind of wasting her time because he's not making himself exclusive or available to her. And when it comes to general mental health, another standout for me on the record is Burning Brains, which does a great job depicting those moments if you do happen to be neurodivergent, where you're feeling a bit overstimulated, overwhelmed. And then there's also Tonight, which I think is also an incredible and very dark, stunning moment where once again Whack is just diving deep into feelings of suicide, just not wanting to be around anymore. And this effectively works as a setup for the closing track 27 Club. But at the end of the day, I'm still a bit torn on this project, even if I did enjoy it a bit overall, because I think Tierra is bringing a very above average level of personality, of character, of thematic focus to this album. These are the kinds of things that I feel like are often missing from most albums, especially on mainstream labels these days that I hear. Plus, I really admire her capacity for being as unfiltered emotionally as she is on this album too. What I feel like kind of let me down on this album though is that a lot of the production and song structuring just didn't go far enough. Honestly, felt like it was bordering on demo quality at points, and not in a way that comes across as quaintly amateurish or endearing. No, it's just kind of in a way that feels sort of unfinished. The vast majority of this album is just one good to great idea after another that's not being pushed far enough, which I think on some level does kind of play into the vibe and the story of the album. There are a lot of themes of loneliness and isolation on this album. The record, in a sense, sounds like it was created or conceived in a very isolated state, and that these songs, these tracks, are little ditties or musical phrases that you would sing or repeat to yourself in order to get yourself through the day, get yourself through the toughest moments in life. I get that sense, I do. But I feel like this album still very much could have been that, but also could have brought more into the fold. Instrumentally, compositionally, really just filling out those melodic and rhythmic gaps that I feel like so many songs here have. That's kind of my main gripe with it. And I'll say this again because I feel like it's a very important point to make, and I don't want anyone to come away from this review with the wrong impression. I love the very personal narratives and storytelling on this album. I love that emotionally Tierra kind of bared it all on this record. I think her sharing as much as she did was very bold, was very brave, and was necessary. But this album is full of just big emotional displays, big emotional revelations, and much of the time I just feel like the song progressions and the instrumentals don't match that. So if I'm looking for anything here, I'm looking for these other elements of the record to get on the same level as the emotions of the album. And I guess, fingers crossed, we get to a point where Tierra is doing exactly that on a future album, which is why I'm feeling a decent to strong 6 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up or a link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Tierra Whack, forever.